This conference will now be recorded.
So you have companies like McKinsey. So I'm just naming only the top four companies because other than top four companies, I don't consider the rest six companies as consulting itself. Core consulting companies in the world are McKinsey, BCG, Bain and Consulting, and yeah, these three. Yeah, so MBB. So normally these kind of projects will go to MBB consultants, McKinsey, BCG, and Bain. And as a strategy consultant, what you need to do is you will go to the State Bank of India headquarters, and then first question you will ask, what is the business need? So why you need to know the business need? Because you need to know the underlying reasons why they want the new CBS system. So that is the first thing as a strategy consultant you need to ask. So this can be translated as analyzing the current state. Because when you go to the office and when you talk to the CTO of State Bank of India, you will first understand why they want to change the CBS system. So in that case, what happens is you may do some elicitation meeting, and as part of the elicitation meeting, you will get two inputs. First thing is what is wrong with Finacle and what they want in the future. You got it? So these kind of discussion happens, and then once you get to know everything about what is wrong with the Finacle and what they want to see in the future, then the next step is defining the future state. So you go back to your office. You're like a banking or strategy consultant, so you have experience with core banking systems and you know everything about core banking systems. Now you go back to your office and like a McKinsey office, and then you have a discussion with the banking capability heads, and you're telling them what is the problem with SBI and how should the new banking system, new core banking system should look like. So you get feedback from your team, or you get feedback, or based on your experience, you now define the future state. So now you will write down the requirements like new CBS system should have big data capabilities, and what else, reporting capabilities, and there should be a mobile app, and there should be blockchain capabilities. So likewise, based on the discussion, so 99% of it, what they want is given the preference. Like the SBI folks, they will already give you a clue what they want to see in the future. So you will add that, and 1% your maybe some 10% what you feel should be part of their future state, because you know what is the problem they're currently facing with Finacle. So now you are defining the future state, wherein you talk about like what should change, right from the policies. You also talk about the policies, what should change. You also talk about the technical infrastructure. So how the in the future state, how the technical infrastructure should look like. So likewise, you start and you try to define the things. And then the third stage, see, as of now, this is happening in the year 2022. Okay. And they want the new CBS system to be implemented in the year 2025. So you have now come up with the future state, like the new CBS system will have all these capabilities, and you come up with all those, like this is how the new CBS system will look like and everything. So at this juncture, as a strategy consultant, always you need to see, you need to go from point A to point B. Okay. So it is and in between there is 3 years transition. So these kind of strategy projects you cannot work on 3 months, 6 months and everything. Strategy, when you work on it, it will take some years. So when from point A to point B you have to go, in between you also need to take care of the unknown. What do you mean by unknown? Unknown, we call it as risk. So that is the next stage. So once you have drafted the future state, your next step is to assess the risk. And what you do as part of as a strategy consultant, first you try to find out what are all the risk that would be part of this project. So one of the risks is that like you need to provide training to all the SBI employees, which is like a big headache. And what if SBI employees are like not interested in learning new CBS system, because they are 10 years they are using Finacle, they know like they can close their eyes and they can do a transaction, because they know that like F10, F5, F4, F3, they know all about those functions. And now if you have to train them in a new system, there may be some resistance. So that can be one of the challenges, technical challenges. So likewise, there can be so many things that can derail this project. So I'm writing down all the risk which can happen in this project. So there can be budget related problems also. So like, what if SBI doesn't have the sufficient money? So that can also be some of the challenges. So likewise, as a strategy consultant, you need to write down all the risk. And once you write down all the risk, you need to find out the risk tolerance of the organization. So risk tolerance of the organization. So here the case in point is SBI. So what do you mean by risk tolerance of the organization? As per Babok, all the organizations in the world, they will come under this three categories. The first type is risk averse category. So excuse my spare typos and everything. Okay. The next thing is risk neutral companies. And then is risk seeking companies. So any company in the world, you can put them under three different buckets. So what is risk averse company? Risk averse companies, they don't want to take risk at all. So if they see these many risks involved in this project, they will immediately say, no, I'm not interested in new CBS system. I will rather be with my old system itself. Because these companies, they don't want to spend even a single dollar also. If they find out there something can be a risk, these companies will back out. For example, all government companies and service-based companies like TCS, HCL, Infosys, all those companies will be risk averse because they don't want to try something new. They are quite happy with whatever is working because they don't want to take any risk that would dent their profit or revenue and anything, because they're afraid to take risk. So those companies will come under risk averse category. Then the next category is risk neutral. So these guys, they are ready to work on new projects, provided it should not have any major impact on their revenue. For instance, the case in point is Google. Google is ready to explore on all the ideas like Google Glass, Google Profile, Orkut, and everything. Google is always ready to work on new projects. But the only caveat is, at one point in time, if there is something that they feel that like it is not working, they'll immediately turn off the plug. So latest example is Google Glass. So Google Glass is something that the idea came before. I mean, if that, I mean, as they say, right? It time traveled and everything. So now that idea, I mean, too early for that idea. They came about with the Google Glass concept like 4 or 5 years early. But that time it was not the ideal market for that. But now, if Google Glass would have released, people would have definitely, they would have like embrace that particular technology. So now what I want to tell you is, risk neutral companies, they are ready to take a small risk. But once they feel that like it is going to have a financial impact, then they will stop that project. So those kind of companies, Google, Microsoft, Adobe, Netflix, all are risk neutral companies because they are very much concerned, but they are open for experimentation. But at the same time, they always think that like if there is a small financial impact also, they will stop the project. So those you need to understand which category your State Bank of India will come into. Then the next thing is risk-seeking companies. The best example which I would like to give you is Tesla. No other company in the world can match what Tesla is doing. So they work on innovative ideas, creative ideas, or the ideas which are like considered not viable, not feasible. But still, Elon Musk will work on that because Elon Musk feels that like someday if something works out, I'll be able to. I mean, he will be able to recover all the costs and everything. So if Tesla works on 10 different projects, 5 projects or 8 projects will fail. But if the other 2 projects, if they win big, they'll be able to recover all the costs. So that is the belief which Elon Musk have. Or those companies which are 100% risk seeking, they are least bothered about the risk. So if you show them all these risks, they are least bothered. And they will say, okay, let's go ahead because we are not bothered about the risk. So those companies will come under risk seeking. So now I want you to tell me, you can unmute yourself and tell me, State Bank of India, for those folks who are from India, which category it will fall into, risk averse, risk neutral, or risk seeking?
SBI, that is risk averse company. They don't take any risk basically.
Perfect.
The service.
So Perfect.
Yeah, it's a government company, so it doesn't take
Yes.
any risk.
So SBI will fall into risk averse because none of the government companies will take risk because they are answerable to the public and the media will completely horn them. If even if a small mistake they do, imagine if they are even spending 2 crores on a project and that project is failing. So next day, what happens is the media will ask the SBI chairman, why did you waste 2 crores on this particular project and everything? So that's the reason none of the government companies have innovation and everything. No, not only in India, across the world government companies they think twice before working on the innovative technology because what if that idea goes wrong, then that person, the person who's taking that decision, he has to answer all his the government and the media and lot of tension. So that's the reason the innovation is like quite slow when it comes to all the government companies. But the private companies, they are ready to take risk because they know that like if they take risk they will be able to make money. So now you need to analyze, and I understood the risk tolerance of my client State Bank of India is risk averse, but I am writing down these many risks are there in this project. So now I have choice. I'll go back to the SBI chairman, SBI CFO, and I'll tell you guys are risk averse companies, but if you go ahead with this project, these many risks can materialize. So now tell me what I should do. So now the SBI folks will decide, okay, but they want the new CBS system because they are not at all happy with Finacle. So they are saying, okay, let's go ahead with the project. So you are now providing a risk assessment. So your job is to do the risk assessment. Your job is not to tell them like what they should do and everything. Your job is to do a risk assessment and submit that report. And the stakeholders have to decide whether they need to continue or not. So once they're giving you a green signal, okay, go to the next stage. Then your next stage is to come up with the change strategy. So what do you mean by change strategy? So you guys would have, if you guys have worked in a very big project, like what do I say, a very big project, if it is like a change management project. So you would have, there would be a role called a change manager. There will be a separate team, change management team, who will be responsible for everything. So what the change strategy is also maybe a subset of change management. So now what you have to do is that see now we are in the year 2022. And this has to be achieved by the year 2025. So this is not an easy task. If you are changing a CBS system, lot of things are changing. The way how the statement will look, the message, SMS alerts, the way how the ledger is maintained, the way how you have to report it to the authorities, everything will change. The UI will change. The net banking UI, mobile app, everything is going to change by the CBS system. So this is going to take 3-year project. This will take minimum 3 years, or sometimes it can go more than 3 years also. So now what you have to do is this cannot be done in an overnight project. Like overnight, I cannot immediately change everything to a single system and say, yeah, I migrated. So now what you do is you're coming up with a change strategy. So what do you mean by change strategy? How you are going to implement this project, or in layman terms, okay, how this will be implemented. You need to go from point A to point B. So how this will be implemented, so that you are writing down in detail. You will come up with the project plan, you will come up with the milestones, you will come up with the release timeline, you will come up with the high level requirements. So likewise, you will prepare a document, and then you will also check whether the operational readiness is there, whether everybody in the organization is ready, because that plays a very important role. Only when everybody is ready, then only you can say this project has to start. Imagine the SBI employees, State Bank of India employees are doing a strike because they don't want the CBS system. Then you cannot start this project. So you also need to create an operational readiness whether do we have the sufficient budget. Imagine this particular transition is going to take 450 crores. So do we have the budget? So imagine if SBI is having only 100 crores, then we are not operationally ready in order to start the project. So we need to have 450 crores, so that you're writing it down. And do we have the L&D team support, learning and development team? So do we have training all those folks on the new CBS system? Do we have the vendor support? So likewise, you come up with the operational readiness plan. And only when all of the things are placed, you will create that timeline. This is what you need to do, stage 1, or maybe phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. So this you are writing it down, and that is called as the change strategy. Clear? So now this is, before you read Babok, my recommendation is that first you need to understand the task in layman terms. You need to know, you need to practically relate it with that of the real world example. And only when you do that, then when you go back and read from Babok, right, you'll be able to connect all the dots. So this is all about strategy analysis for task. Practically, if you have to relate and if you have to find out. Now let's go back and see what is there in Babok. So strategy analysis, I'll quickly skim through in the interest of time. So strategy analysis, it's all about you're in the current state and you want to achieve something in the future state. So you need to go from point A to point B. In between, you need to take into consideration the change strategy and what is the risk that is there from moving from point A to point B. So simple. So there are 4 tasks: analyze current state, define future state, you take into consideration the risk, and finally you define the change strategy. So what is the first task? Analyzing the current state. So now let's look into this example. So here in this example, I told you when you analyze the current state, what is the only thing which you will ask them, because the business need is identified. So you first look into the business need and then you will come up with what is wrong with Finacle. So what is wrong with Finacle? That is called as the current state description. Like you try to identify what are all the current capabilities and everything, and what they want to see in the future. This is called as the business requirement. Now let's go back and connect the dots. So analyze current state. So you have the business need, and I told you that you need to go and talk to all the stakeholders. So elicitation results confirmed. And what is the output here? Current state. Sorry. So what? Just a second. So what is the output here? Current state description, business requirement. So we already discussed this with an example. Without understanding the needs clearly and completely, it is not possible to come up with a strategy that is coherent. So first you need to find out whether it is a threat, it is an opportunity, or it is a strategic initiative, or it is through the competitors. That's what you're identifying. Underlying reasons why they want the new CBS system. So as per Babok, there are 4 ways how this would have got triggered. It can be top down, bottom up, middle management, or external drivers. And then when you analyze the current state, the key thing is the business need. And how do you analyze the current state? What is going wrong with the Finacle? So when you ask those questions, you need to ask these questions also. What is the organizational structure? What is the culture of State Bank of India? What is the current capabilities of Finacle? What is the process of Finacle? What is the technology and infrastructure of Finacle? Likewise, you will ask questions and you will jot it down. What is the current core banking policies, or what is the, when can I open an account? How much should I deposit? All those policies, because those are all related to the core banking, right? So all those policies you're documenting. Current business architecture of Finacle. So all these things you will document it as part of the current state description. And whenever you're talking about what is wrong, what is happening currently, they will also tell, the stakeholders will also tell you what they want to see in the future. Those things you will mark it separately and you will write it down as the business requirements. So that's all about analyzing the current state. So these are all the techniques that you can do: benchmarking, focus group, mind mapping, process analysis, SWOT analysis, vendor assessment. All these techniques can help you in finding out the business requirements. So almost all the stakeholders are involved in this particular step. And now let's talk about the next task, define future state. So now let's come back to our example, define future state. This is all about like what you want to see in the future. So now what happens is, you come back here. So this is something which I'm doing it in my desk, right? I'll come back because this is something which I know, like since I'm a strategy consultant, I should know what they want to see in the future. So now the only input which I would need for this is the business requirement, because this is the business requirement has to be there, because business requirement is going to define the future state. So the only input which I would require here is going to be the business requirement. And here what I'm going to do is, I'm going to come up with the objectives, because everything has to be using the SMART framework, what they want to achieve in the future and everything. So I'll come up with the business objectives I'll come up with some goals which they want to achieve in the future, and then I'll also talk about the potential value. What do you mean by potential value? Because if this new CBS system is implemented, what is the potential value that my client is going to get? Like additionally, for instance, the number of for instance, uh, new CBS system, then it would be efficient system, robust analytical capability. So likewise, I'll come up with some potential value and talking about like how this new CBS system can change the overall process, how it can be process efficient. So that those all things can be jotted down as part of the potential value. Now let's go back and see. When you have to define the future state, you will come up with the business requirement, and then you will have the potential value, business objective, and also future state description. I forgot to add. This is whatever I have added here. These things can be called as the future state description. So now you guys know how to connect the dots, right? The business requirement is the only thing that is needed, and then you're coming up with the business goals, potential value, and future state description. And now talking about the elements, no major changes. Whatever you have done as part of the current state description, the same thing you will think from the future perspective, like what all things can be the constraints, or what should be the new structure, how should the culture of the State Bank of India should change, that you're writing it down. What are the new capabilities and processes that should be there? So new capabilities and processes, we told that like big data capability, mobile app, blockchain, all these things should be there. What should be the new technology for a core banking system in the future? What should be the new policies? What should be the new business architecture? Those all things you're writing it down, and these all things will be drafted in that document called as future state description. And then you're also talking about the potential value, like is there any external opportunities, like strength of new partners or any potential loss? All these things you're jotting it down. So these are all the techniques that can help you. The same set of techniques like process modeling, SWOT, interviews, brainstorming, all these techniques, all the elicitation techniques you can do. And this also involves the support of all the stakeholders. The whole involved in the current state, you will reach out to them also, because sometimes you may need their inputs. Now let's talk about the third task, assess risk. So here what happens is, I told you, you need to do a risk assessment. You need to come up with all the risk, and you also need to look into the risk tolerance of the organization. So now let's look at Babok. How will you assess risk? So what are the inputs that are required? So you will take into consideration the previous output, which is business objective, potential value. You will also take into consideration the designs and requirement if it is available. Elicitation results, when you had the first round of discussion with all the stakeholders, if somebody would have told you about the risk, so that is also that would be covered as part of the elicitation results. And some things can be coming up from the external environment also. Competitor, for instance, State Bank competitor ICICI Bank is having a robust CBS system, so you are losing out clients because of it. So in that case, because of the competitor pressure, you want to change the CBS. So that is also the influences. Or maybe the Reserve Bank of India is asking all the banks to change their CBS system. So sometimes the risk can originate from the external sources also. So these are all the inputs that can help you in finding out the risk. And here you're coming up with a complete risk assessment, which is risk analysis result. So what do you mean by risk? As I told you, a risk can be unknown, anything. So almost even if you are a very experienced strategy consultant also, you will not be able to come up with all the risk, because there are some things which you also cannot anticipate that as a risk, but that may finally turn out as a risk later also. So whatever from your current experience or from your previous experience, you are writing it down, all the list of risk and everything, but you always need to know there can be a case of unknown always, which you did not anticipate to turn out as a risk, but it may turn out also. So that you need to keep in mind. And you also take into consideration the constraint, assumptions, and dependencies. And you also look into the risk tolerance of the organization. And then you try to find out whether the risk is more and the benefit is less. Should we continue? Or the benefit is more, risk is less. Should I what should I recommend? Taking into consideration the risk tolerance, all these things you need to decide, and you need to talk to the stakeholders. So finally, as a business analyst, you need to provide a recommendation. And when you provide a recommendation, you need to keep in mind the risk assessment which you did and what is the risk profile of the organization. So you need to tell like these are all the risk and you come under risk neutral category. So my recommendation is that like we should not proceed further. So likewise, you as a business analyst or a strategy consultant, you need to provide the recommendation. And it is up to the stakeholders to take a decision. Your job is to only provide a recommendation. So this is an example for a risk charter. So you guys can see the risk description, where what is the description or the what will be the possible consequences, likelihood of that risk occurring, what would be the impact, and who will work on this risk, and what is the action plan. So these all things you will draft it in the risk charter kind of template. And now the last task is all about define change strategy. And in order to define the change strategy, you need to know like from this point you need to achieve from a point A to point B you need to go. So you have the current state description and future state description, so that will be the input. And you also have the risk analysis result. And since the success of the project completely depends upon the support of the stakeholders, you need to also have stakeholder engagement approach as also one of the input. So all these four contribute, and you're coming up with the change strategy, so which we already discussed. You're coming up with the change strategy, and you also come up with the solution scope. So I forgot to add about solution scope, because by this time I know that like what all things will be part of what will be in scope